Hello, everyone. We are approaching the halfway point here of WFS Live on day two. Just a few little notes from journalists who've been getting in touch, just wondering where they can get hold of resources to do with this virtual event across this week. If you would like newswires written in English, Spanish or Arabic, head to the newsroom by EFA. You can access them there. There's the media vault for our daily press releases on the most salient points, the most relevant panels. They will be sent out there in the media vault. And also, we're working with our new media partner this year, SNTV, and they will distribute bits of selected kind of content to their clients worldwide, which is great because it helps us get the word out about what we're doing here. And there have been some incredible news lines that have emerged already in the first day and a half or so of this event, and also video panels, video highlights will be uploaded to a Google Drive that will be shared with the media as well. So hopefully that answers all of your questions. But if you do have any more, please put them in the chat and we'll keep them across for you. Now, for a long time, and really for too long, the business of football was governed by men. It was the domain of men in the boardroom, amongst the decision makers, the movers and shakers. The people who drove sport were, for the large part, male, and they shaped the sport that way towards what they considered was a male audience. But through a combination of factors, that really is changing, and there are different voices now making themselves heard. Quite simply, women. And the most high profile of those, perhaps on the field of play and in terms of her stance off the field of play, is Megan Rapinoe. But there are plenty more besides. Millennial women are already blazing the trail. Some are occupying positions of influence within football, both on and off the pitch. The tectonic plates have already begun to shift. They're fiercely independent. They are poised to have a big say in the economic, social and cultural future of the sport. And then come the demographic age-wise of those born between the late 1990s and the early 2010s. They're known as Generation Z. They are sensitive. They're incredibly acutely aware of the world around them. They're more sophisticated too in terms of the way that they use content and media. And understanding of this age demographic has proved pretty elusive. In fact, there are very few that have really managed to corner the market there. And this is why brands and organizations really do need to get with the program on this. So these two generations of women will be the most influential, questioning and demanding of generations, and quite rightly so. I think this is going to be an absolutely fascinating panel. It's brought to you in collaboration with Wasserman, and your speakers are the executive director at Tottenham Hotspur Football Club, Donna-Maria Cullen, head of sports marketing at PepsiCo, Toman, current midfielder for OL Reign and the US women's national team, Sofía Huerta, and to moderate this session, EVP, the collective at Team Wasserman, Thayer Lavielle. Thayer, as I say, I have the sense that this is going to be one of the most impactful and important sessions of the day, and indeed of all of WFS Live so far. So please take it away. The floor's yours.
Thanks so much, David, and welcome to our panelists who are each experts in their own right. So thank you for having us. It's an honor to be here today. What I want to do first is just talk a little bit about why Generation Z and Millennial women, just to level set and set the table for this discussion. So at the collective, we are a division of Wasserman that is focused on really finding parity for and driving parity for women across all sports, whether that's as athletes or as consumers. And so one of the things we knew right away is that we needed to go out and get more information around who is the woman fan and who is she, because she's driving so much of a household spend. So we looked at really the fact that 85% of all household spend within the Western world is being driven by women. And particularly in the United States, so much of the banking decisions are being held by women, and 2/3 of the wealth in the United States will be driven and held by women in the next decade. And so that made us stop and say, well, what about Gen Z and Millennial women, particularly as consumers, and what's shaping them, and how are they different than Gen X and boomers, who are really in control of brands and properties today? And so how do we look at this differently? And what we found was several things. They're very different in many ways. Number one is that they have been essentially born digital natives, certainly Gen Z in particular, but to that end, they are inundated consistently with content and messaging and opportunities to understand the world. As David had said, they are far more sophisticated than certainly Gen X was when I was growing up as an ancient Gen Xer. But what we realized pretty quickly is that the way that they operate is pretty different. They're aware of their economic power. And with economic power comes power, but we're also, as older generations, handing them a very distressed world. They have massive climate change to reckon with. They have a very divisive political landscape. They have a pandemic right now. They have racial, strife going on in many areas of the world that they are willing to take on as young women to help conquer these things. And yet, they want to do it in their own terms. And what does that mean? They want to do it in a way that is really on demand. They want brands and properties, because they are not feeling served in the marketplace, to be able to help them along, right? So it's an opportunity for brands to come in and serve with purpose to help make a better world, if you will. They want also for brands and properties to feel like they're targeting her. I want it to feel like it's for me specifically and customized to me, but I also want it to feel like it fits in with my many different groups that I want to belong to, whether that's my fan club of a soccer team or, and I will use soccer interchangeably with football, sorry, it's an American thing, or whether that is with, with my group of, student friends or my, work friends or whatever other interests I might have. So they're a really unique group. They demand a lot more out of brands and properties. There's one interesting stat that we have in a white paper that we recently published, which is the basis of this conversation today, which states that 47% of all global citizens, which by the way is almost half of the world, are really unhappy with their government's ability to find progress on pressing issues, which leaves a huge opportunity for brands and properties to step in and start solving some of these problems, driving more loyalty and ultimately more conversion for brand dollars. And so with all of that in mind, I wanted to start this conversation with some of the most incredible luminaries, I would say, in the business today. Donna, you come to us from the Tottenham's Hotspurs, and you have been there for a little while as the executive director, but you've been incredibly instrumental in developing the women's program as well as the new venue that you have there. So you've taken what was a 36,000 person venue to a 61,000 person venue, if I'm correct in those numbers. How did you approach that, understanding who this consumer is shifting into? How do you all of a sudden take a traditional football fan in England and convert them into a wider base of women fans?
Hi, Thayer. And thanks for having me on the panel today. Yeah, you almost called me the old lady of the club, and I'm not far off that, actually. I seem to have been here forever. But,
Never.
Yeah, it has been fascinating to watch our fans develop and our generations change. With the old stadium, White Hart Lane, we always had the issue that we didn't have a churn on our season ticket holders, so we knew who our season ticket holders were, and they just gradually aged and aged. With our new stadium, which is actually 62,850 now, we keep finding some seats. We obviously then had this fantastic opportunity to just welcome more of the fans in as season ticket holders, and also more fans internationally to come and visit us as well. And one of the things we were determined to do is embrace what we felt the experience of coming to watch football in a football stadium should be. So you're absolutely right. We focused across our diverse fan base, and in particular, and I had a vested interest in this, specifically the facilities that the women would use, whether that was just the toilets or the concessions, whether it was what was on the menu, the choice, the beverages and so forth. We really drilled down into that to make sure that whoever walked through the doors, it was a great experience. And I was looking at the stats yesterday, just in knowing I was coming on here, in terms of who we have coming through our doors, but also who we have internationally. And we actually have more female fans internationally than domestically. And of those, they are becoming increasingly younger. And I hope that is because women's football is taking off in such a great way. And for me, it's been fantastic to watch the progress of our women's team, because they started really as just a sort of office women's team nearly 20 years ago, and they have grown organically and just gone from success to success, and now they're in the WSL. And it's what we've been able to do is bring all of that together again, using social media predominantly to make sure that what we convey to our fans, we are incredibly even-handed between our women's and our men's, and that we can reach the global audience. The world's becoming a smaller place. If we learned anything from the pandemic, actually, it was just how we should all be connected with the rest of the world, just how we've fast-tracked all the digital aspects of our lives, and just how, dare I say, how important social media was, because we used that as our main communication tool during the whole of the pandemic.
So you're actively out there reaching them. That's exciting. Justin, you, as your role of head of sports, marketing for PepsiCo, it's just a small job with probably over 100 partnerships, I think. How do you look at, I think, brand by brand, even how you start to target and shift to a younger, more, or just a vastly different consumer? I mean, the way that fans are engaging in sports today from a viewership perspective has just shifted so incrementally and fundamentally in the past 7 years. How do you all of a sudden start to realign your partnerships with properties and your partnerships with media partners in order to accommodate and find them?
Yeah, it's a great question. And thank you again for having me as part of this, and great to be on this panel with Sofía and Donna. It's just a pleasure and a privilege. No, it's a question we struggle with, and we're challenged by every day. I think it starts with probably looking at some of the data there that you mentioned up front, which is, things like nearly 40% of Gen Zers say they are, influenced by social media in their purchases. And so it starts by recognizing some of those facts. That's what's truly driving the decisions and the eyeballs of this new consumer. And then pivoting our marketing initiatives, specifically in my world, our sports marketing initiatives, to make sure we're accounting for that and really making that a focal point. We very much do think digital first these days in any campaign or any platform we do. As an example, we are sponsors of the NBA 3-point contest here in the US. Every year that happens at the NBA All-Star Game. And we really start every year planning that platform by saying, hey, how is this going to be consumed digitally? How can we bring consumers and fans closer to this great event that not everybody can come to? But how do we reach, millions and tens of millions of people by giving them digital content and bringing fans one step closer to the event? Similarly, for the Pepsi Super Bowl halftime show, again, here in the US with our NFL partnership, we really start, that's a massive media platform, and it gets 100 million viewers in the US. But we really start with saying, hey, how do we give a great digital, almost second screen experience to not just 100 million people, but hopefully 500 million people worldwide? So we do start with thinking digital first. We know that they are more and more consuming the teams they love and the athletes they love, digital first. And especially in a pandemic, it's crazy. That's literally kind of been the only way that fans can consume sports. You can't go live, right? There's nothing, or there, at least for a while, there was nothing happening live, not even on TV in a way, before sports started again this summer. So it was really, I think it accelerated that behavior, that digital first mindset and engagement mechanism. And we're trying to stay up to date with that as a brand to make sure we're being relevant, delivering fans relevant content, delivering our messages where fans want to see them, when they want to see them, and hopefully ultimately influencing their purchase.
Thanks for that. And Sofía, one of the things that we found in really looking at Gen Z and millennials, but particularly Gen Z fans, is that they have an athlete-first viewpoint on sports these days, particularly football. So Nielsen came out with a study not long ago that said that football and basketball are by far globally the sports that Gen Z is most engaged with. To boot, while many Gen Xers are diehard loyal to fans, I would say boomers and Gen X are very loyal to their teams. What we're finding is that Gen Z is certainly loyal to those teams, but because they often have not lived in the town where their family's team loyalty lies, because of just the migratory way that we all work today, so many Gen Zs are also really affected by star athletes. As an athlete, really, who has played on a Mexican national team and a U.S. national team, you've played in Australia, you've played in the U.S., you're now training in France. What do you see in terms of the varied fan bases and how younger fans are getting more engaged in the game?
Thank you for having me on the panel. I'm also so honored to be here with all of you. That's also a great question. I remember when I was younger watching the 99 World Cup, I was only 7 at that point, and I just saw them on TV just for 90 minutes. That's all I saw. And that was going to influence my life forever. And so now, obviously, new generations are being exposed. Social media is a big thing. They're able to see everything that is going on. And specifically, women's soccer players have done such a good job at building their brands. They're not just athletes, they're activists, they're authors. They have clothing lines. They're so much more than just the athlete, and they use their platforms to open up about what they go through. I think mental health is a really big thing that's happening right now, and fans just truthfully feel like they can connect with us on more of a level than just us as athletes. And I think generationally speaking, Gen Zs and millennials, like we said before, they are more influenced and they have a lot of thoughts and they're being exposed to a lot of things. So I think that they want to be a part of the help. They want to help the athletes. And so, for example, women's soccer players, they're fighting for equality. And I think fans and young girls want to feel like they're helping towards that. And so I think just social media has been such a big stepping stone for fans to become loyalists to athletes.
I would agree with that. I think obviously you and your age set. I think you're a young millennial, if I am reading the bio correctly. But that your age group and age set of young women soccer players are incredibly strong at really understanding your consumer base, both men and women, and how to appeal to that. I will also say that in this age of uptick in women's sports in many ways, not only women athletes and football and basketball, WNBA in the US as well. Just in general, women's sports have had quite a year with an influx of, kind of great stories. It could be a pretty disastrous year with the pandemic. And in fact, when we started this pandemic, many, many outlets said, that's it. Women's sports is done. They're going to be the last to return. And there are certainly some teams and players that will have a harder time coming back from the brink. However, what we have also found is that there are some incredibly bright stories coming out of this pandemic where women have continued to innovate and lead sports in the entire sports world through this incredibly trying time, both from a virtual draft, from the first organizations to play in a bubble with the NWSL, to social justice campaigns. When we talk about purpose, Donna, I know you have to plan with your new stadium 365 days a year of ways to engage the broader community, and that working within sports can no longer just be a weekend affair. It really needs to feel like it's touching all aspects of people's lives today, which I do think athletes, and I'll come back to you, Sofía, on this one, have really tapped into in terms of, a purpose-driven campaign. But how do you as a property really dive into supporting the community and looking at how the game of football and your teams specifically can help bolster the various things that are important in your community?
I think we have been one of the clubs that's always had this as part of our DNA, not least of which because the area in which the stadium has its footprint is one of the most challenged and diverse and poorest neighbourhoods in London. So we've always been very conscious that we have to use the fact that we are a football brand that's easily recognisable and can motivate people to do the best we can within the community. We have one of the largest foundations of any club in the country, and they are active 365 days a year in our community, mainly because the need is there. So we will have programs we deliver on our own properties and others that we will be outreach in the schools and in community centres and so forth. And primarily to do with social inclusivity, to raising educational standards. We've just opened a school of which we're incredibly proud of. It's in its second year, and it's the poorest children from one of the poorest neighbourhoods coming to school and being taught by tutors from top private schools. It's a fantastic model, and we've seen 66% of them go on and get offers from Russell Group universities. So I think, we all come in and do our job working for a football club, but sometimes it's the aspects of that just blow you away and go wow. And because we're in an area of such need, we are always looking for other ways we can support it. During the pandemic, as Sofía mentioned, mental health was a really key issue. So a lot of what we did, we had Zoom calls and we had workshops and we engaged with those in our community that we knew would be finding it hardest. We were home to a food hub to make sure we could distribute food. And for something like that, we're grateful to do that because we know our community and we know which ones are going to need us most when we're out there. And then we also found ourselves, and you've got to look, the pandemic because it's not quite over yet. It's challenged us in so many other ways, but very often that's when you get your best ideas, you get your best moments. Our students all made protective masks, and we were home to the antenatal unit of our hospital so that pregnant women could come to our stadium and not have to go to a hospital close by COVID patients. And our men's team and our women's team took part in all of those activities with us. Not obviously couldn't do much of it in person, although we did have the women's team down there packing the vegetables in the food hub, but certainly we've all become experts on Zoom now, and I think the players took to that with a lot of energy as well.
Thank you. It's interesting. I'm just looking at our poll and questions coming in from the group that's watching, and it says poll results coming in: are Gen Z or millennial sports executives mentally better prepared for situations like COVID-19? 71% have said yes, 14% said no, it's the same, and 14% are unsure. So it's interesting that you guys are lending so much of your time and energy towards really bolstering the community in various ways, and mental health is obviously certainly increasingly important, also just because of the constant inundation for Gen Z around, their phones. I mean, where they just were born, they couldn't. When I grew up, my mom just turned off the telly and said, "Go outside." It's not so easy anymore. As someone who has Gen Zs in my house, Justin, I wanted to ask you a little bit. I know you guys are pretty deep into football as well. You have recently launched a fantastic ad for Pepsi with Paul Pogba, Messi, Salah, Sterling. But you've also really, created a great commitment in August, I think, with UEFA for the women's game. I was hoping that you could talk a little bit about that commitment because you should be, cheered on for that.
Yeah, no, thank you. We're really proud of it. I think it's certainly a recognition of the increasing importance of female athletes and female sports in the world, and this is by far our largest global initiative into women's sports. So you're right, they were back in August. We signed a multi-year deal with the UEFA Women's Football, and that is going to obviously complement our relationship with UEFA on the men's side. So having both, we think, is a really big unlock and allows us to do some pretty impactful things. And we're really excited about going into the first season with both of them, right? So we're really excited about that. On the US side, we're making a bigger push into women's sports as well. I mean, we just kind of doubled down with the WNBA. We're now sponsoring the All-Star game and the 3-point contest with the WNBA as well as with the NBA. We have star athlete Asia Wilson. She was the WNBA's MVP this past season. We have Mariah Durand on the skateboarding side and Julia Moreno on the snowboarding side. So we are doing more, and we have to do more, and we plan to do much more in the future. But we're proud of the strides we've made most, recently with the global edition of Women's UEFA. But I think we try to. The strategy there is to to completely own and double down on platforms. I think you see it with UEFA and you see it with the NBA and WNBA as good examples. When in the WNBA, we said, hey, we want to really own a single platform. And that just happens to be the Mountain Dew 3-point contest, right? It's a very fan-facing event. It's fun. It fits with the Mountain Dew brand. And we've come in with both the NBA and the WNBA to really own and elevate that platform as a marketing vehicle, and to really kind of increase the engagement and enjoyment for fans. Then on the global football side, global soccer side, as you mentioned, we after several years with men's UEFA, we really said, hey, we need to kind of own this across men's and women's, recognizing that there's tremendous power and a fan base for both, and there's going to be a role in both for our portfolio. And so we've had some early success, I think, with both of our Pepsi, Gator, and our Frito brands, leveraging both men's and women's UEFA. We've had both female and male athletes in some commercials earlier this year, back in March, for Frito, our chip brand, Frito-Lay. So we're really, I think, testing the waters, and much more to come. But we're really proud of the strides we've made and looking to activate in a much bigger way, into 21.
Thanks. That's exciting, and exciting when we always see big brands like PepsiCo supporting women's sports across the board. So keep it up. Good job.
Yes.
Sofía, hey, you've kind of worked for and played for teams all over the world, and now you're training for now in France with Lyon. Is that right? That's where you are. And I wanted to understand two things. Number one is, in your experience, what are some of the kind of best ways that your teams have engaged with fans as a whole to really pull out and draw out more loyal fandom? And there seems to be quite an info. This is actually one of the questions from somebody watching. There seems to be quite a move from American players to start to go overseas to train in the off time. Is that, what's the rationale for that? Is that for just additional training purposes?
Well, I'll address the second question first, just because it's simpler. I think right now players are going abroad just because they have a more set schedule and games are happening. The NWSL isn't happening right now. And so it definitely caters to players to be playing in games consistently, especially going into hopefully an Olympic year. And then just as a player who's obviously played on multiple teams, how do we connect best with our fans? I think, every player is different, but what I've seen is social media is honestly the biggest way that I see it. Going on there and interacting with our fans through questions and answers, going live, and just having your fans being able to ask you questions and you responding right away. I also think that fans, obviously, like I was saying earlier, want to relate to us on a deeper scale than just as athletes, So if you go onto your platform and talk about, maybe what you're going through, especially with the pandemic recently, mental health, I think being an athlete is amazing, but there's also the hard times about it. And I just think social media interaction creates opportunities for fans to just build deeper relationships with players, to model their lives and their styles and, careers and what they see from their favorite players. And I just think fans want to connect with players want to connect with fans by being relatable and caring and, willing to promote the greater good. And I think, fans are looking for inspirations from athletes who stand for something other than their own successes, especially in the areas of quality and even the environment and social change. So, I do see players creating their own brands as a strategy to connect with their fans. Like I said earlier, you see players, they become authors, and then you see players also creating clothing lines. And I just think that's another way to connect with their fans.
Exciting opportunities, both during your professional career and then as you continue to graduate on as a young player to, the opportunities really are endless, I think, for young athletes today. Donna, just really quickly, we have an incredible question from the group here, which is asking around the difference in fandom between your men's team and your women's team. Are you able to understand really in depth who those different audiences are? Because studies will show that 84% of all sports fans will watch and are interested in women's sports, men and women. Is that the case for your women's team as well?
So I think if you differentiate it between attending a match to watch it and watching it on television, match attendance of women's matches has tended to be largely, in the first instance, it's generated by each of the players and the friends and family they have around them, and then gradually that grows to a wider fan base. And we see that as fairly diverse, although predominantly in our instance it's female. And then we recently hosted Arsenal v Spurs in our new stadium, where we had the record attendance crowd. And I think the spectacle of that and the ability to make sure that we could get as many in as we wanted, I think we had over 38,000 for that. That really was very family based. So for women's football, we get it far more family orientated, and supported a lot of it by daughters as opposed to sons, not wishing to be totally stereotypical about this, but I think, again, the difference is there's easier access to the women's football matches, so families can go in groups, whereas for the men's matches, you're probably looking at the original season ticket holder, and then maybe they might be able to take one of the siblings with them.
Yeah, that's interesting. Thank you for that. You guys are amazing, so articulate, and I wish we could keep going because you all have so much to add. And I honestly, I feel so secure in knowing that the future of football is in your respective hands. And Sofía, we wish you such luck in your playing career and going forward with that. We're cheering you on.
Thank you.
David, I'm going to pass it back to you.
Thank you, Thayer. As promoted, as advertised, as expected, a fantastic panel. Thank you so much for all of the input you've all given. And Thayer, taking your sort of point of departure, that quite staggering statistic of 47% of all global citizens being unhappy with governments finding progress in pressing issues, and as you say, the opportunity that elicits. I think that's one of the things, isn't it? We've all been going through a difficult time, but that does present opportunity. We heard from Donna on the operational, on the facilities to really help across the diverse fan base and the things that women have to engage with and what they would normally use. And interesting that you've got more female fans internationally. I found that quite interesting as well. And you talked about the importance of social media. Of course, we heard a lot from Sofía about the importance of social media. And as you say, women's soccer players, football players are activists, they're entrepreneurs, they're authors, they're brilliant at building their brand. I'd say that they're much better at building their brand than male players are, and that male players are learning from female players right now, and they're finding purpose. And you can see from the very recent examples that we've seen in the UK, and I'm sure that Donna, you'll agree with this. When you look at Marcus Rashford, when you look at Raheem Sterling, I'm sure that they will have seen female players doing this already from the get-go. It's part of maybe a little bit of a difference of approach, in that people feel empowered to do that now, and standing for something, as Sofía says, more than their own successes. Thayer, you mentioned the innovations there with virtual drafts, bubbles, and social justice as well. And we talked about purpose as well with Donna and the work of the Tottenham Hotspur Foundation. I used to work for the BBC a long time ago, and I remember doing one of the community features on Match of the Day on the great work that the Tottenham Hotspur Foundation does, and have been up to White Hart Lane, have been to some of those projects, and I absolutely can endorse all of the work that you do, and especially that school that you mentioned. It is those facets of your job that utterly blow you away, past the balance sheet, past the 3 points, past the expected goals, or whatever it is that is our day in, day out. And from Justin, I think it's important, another perspective there from the brand side, digital first, and thinking about, relevant content, how to reach people in the way that they want to be reached, when they want to be reached, how they want to be reached. And having already seen how you own that platform with the 3-point contest, what else there is to discover in the women's game already with UEFA, that you think, okay, look, there is real opportunity here. There's tremendous power, as you put it, in both fan bases, but particularly, I think, with the women's game. And, you can see the work that other brands are doing in this space, not just PepsiCo, but also Visa, for example. They do often lead the way as far as women's football are concerned. And we will have a representative of Visa as well, who will be telling us about why they've made a beeline for women's football and how that is helping engage the Gen Z and millennials women that we've been talking about. And they're absolutely demographics that really should be not just noticed but listened to. And I think that's one of the key takeaways from this session as well. Thayer, thank you so much for chairing that conversation. You did so brilliantly, and thank you to Donna, Sofía, and to Justin for their input. Thank you very much indeed. Okay, so we're making good progress here, WFS Live, and we will continue, and we'll be going into that word that P word that sort of it's been mentioned again, and it's such an important one. We mentioned yesterday that we really do believe at WFS that we need to make this industry more modern, more progressive, fairer, more supportive. The world of football is the football we want, but the game we need. And purpose as a strategic business driver in collaboration with 17 Sport is our next port of call here at WFS Live, and we'll be doing that in 5 minutes' time. So we'll see you again then.